I don't ever give them any clues. So we never know what's going to happen. And it's good. And it's good. So thank you for choosing to be here today, whether you're physically here in the room or joining us out in Zoom land or YouTube land or wherever, whenever. There's only one, right? So thank you for choosing to participate in whatever way you do in this spiritual community's existence. So we've been working our way through Karen Russo's Money Keys this month, and today's no exception. This week I'm touching on the high points of chapters 7 through 9. These chapters ask a curious question that surprised me when I read it the first time. And the question is, who are our people? And what do they have to do with our spiritual understanding of finances? And how do our people influence that experience? It's like, what? What do my people have to do with that? It's like, well, yeah, actually, when you start thinking about it, those people that make our community up matter to each one of us. So way back when I was a baby minister, somebody asked me what my personal theme was. And I looked at them weird and I said, what's a personal theme? Nobody told me this was coming. And they said, really, you have one, you just don't know what it is yet. And I said, okay, cool, I'll think about it and I'll get back to you. And what I realized fairly quickly was my personal theme was a Ram Dass quote. We're just walking each other home. It's like, okay. So what that means to me is no matter what path people are on, no matter what our path seems to do, there's no wrong answer. Every single one of us is just moving in the direction of what we perceive as truth, and what we imagine is the highest and best truth we can come up with, and so is everybody else. So if I have a definition of what I think everybody should be doing, I'm probably mistaken. Actually, take probably out. I am mistaken. Because everybody's walking their own path. Everybody is walking their own path. And we are all walking each other home. Because everybody gets there, right? So we've got this, we collectively have this idea in Centers for Spiritual Living or Religious Science or whatever name you want to use for us, that there is no wrong answer. There is only the answer that works for each one of us. And it's going to be different, and worse than that, it's going to change. So what I thought was true 5 years ago, if I'm down in the weeds, if I'm down in the details, I'm probably changing my mind. Because I have become more aware, I have learned new things, I have broadened my attention. And Spirit says, there's only one. Everybody's in it. Everybody's inside that oneness. And everybody's way is the right way for them. So that's kind of that backstory. Now, in the Declaration of Principles, Dr. Holmes wrote, we believe in the individualization of the Spirit in us, and that all people are individualizations of the one Spirit. We believe in the eternality, immortality, and continuity of life, forever and ever expanding. We believe heaven is within us, and that we experience it to the degree we become conscious of it. That's important. Because if we think heaven's not in us, we can't experience it. Once we remember that it is, regardless of what crazy-making stuff is going on in front of our eyes, we are in our current definition of heaven. Boy, that's wonky. Sometimes. And then the last one I'm going to read is, we believe that the ultimate goal of life is a complete freedom from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by everybody. Sure to be attained. So anytime I decide I want to get on my high horse and decide that somebody's doing it wrong, well, guess who's confused? That would be me. And I get to go, we're just walking each other home. Everybody's on their path at the moment, doing the thing they understand best. And I get to remember that. So that is my personal theme. Because it is that thing that I keep in the front of my mind anytime I decide that that's not true. Because I get to look at that and remember, no matter what experience I'm having in this world of form, everybody's doing what they perceive as the right thing. And the fact that I disagree with them is somewhat irrelevant. So I could read you the rest of them. There's one page of this declaration, and if you take the Science of Mind magazine, you have it every month. It's printed close to the front, and it's printed in the front of the text. Well, it's in one of my copies, and it's not in the other one. So you've got it, okay? It's probably on the website too. I forgot to check this morning. So is it for you a wonderful feeling to know that there's not one right way? Or is that disturbing? Think about your answer. Because for some people, it's really uncomfortable to know that there's not a path that is the right way. And from my point of view, it takes the pressure off. We're not having to figure out what the path is through the labyrinth because you can't get it wrong. The other thing I want to say before I get going on the topic for the talk is, in the final conclusion in the Science of Mind text on page 423, Holmes wrote, "What the world needs is spiritual conviction, followed by spiritual experience. I would rather see a student of this science prove its principles than to have them repeat all the words of wisdom that have ever been uttered. It is far easier to teach the truth than it is to practice it." Boy, that's the truth. But the practice is personal to each, and in the long run, no one can live our lives for us. To each is given what they need, and the gifts of heaven come alike to all. How we shall use these gifts is all that matters. To hold one's thoughts steadfastly to the constructive, that which endures, and to the truth, which may not be easy in a rapidly changing world, but to the one who makes the attempt, not succeeds, the one who makes the attempt, much is guaranteed. The essence of spiritual mind healing and of all true religious philosophy is an inner realization of the presence of perfection within and around about. He wrote these words 100 years ago or more, and they're every bit as true today as they were then, because we're always living in this rapidly changing world, because it's always compared to what, right? So how does this work for you? How is your practice going? Who in your world supports your spiritual development, your spiritual unfoldment, as we say? Notice nowhere in that conclusion does Holmes say we have to get it right. He says we have to keep at it. And he says if we do, when we do, much is guaranteed. So what does that do to your mind My job is to stay on practice, to stay on point. Your job, too, is to keep at it, to keep working it, to keep paying attention, to keep noticing. So today's topic, who are your people? Reverend Karen described 3 different groups, well, really 4, that she wrote about in chapter 7 and 8. Your role models, your mirrors, and your mentors. And then in chapter 8, she wrote about your personal relationships. And she wrote about the many ways that these relationships interact with the individual experience and expression of their financial abundance. So let's start with role models, particularly financial ones. Who are yours? Who are your role models? And why did you pick them? And, perhaps more importantly, how do you define what success looks like? Because it's individual and there's no wrong answer. Every single person chooses what makes the most sense to them and can change their mind. That just screws everything up, doesn't it? Because you don't know if you've got it right. How do you know? You know by paying attention. Oh, that. So, a part of that story about who your role models are is, what are your beliefs about people who do well financially? Do you think it's okay for people who are spiritual to do well financially? Or do you have stories that rich people are greedy or selfish? That they can't be both spiritual and wealthy. They're not allowed because you have to pick. Well, you don't have to pick. Both are possible. There's only one. God is in all. God is in money. God is in poverty. Although we would probably say that poverty is a misuse of the law of good. Because it's a choice we make to decide that we are not allowed to have goodness. Why would we pick that? Why would anybody choose to not have goodness in their life? We do. We do it all the time. So if we're not intentional about choosing our role models, guess what we get? We get default thinking. We get what society says is true. We get what our parents believed. We get what our generation said. Last Monday night in class, I think it was last Monday night, sometime this last week, I was talking to somebody about the Depression era babies, right? Because if you were raised in the Depression and there really wasn't enough, then your bias, your mindset is towards, oh, I have to hoard because I don't know whether I'm actually going to have enough macaroni for tomorrow or not. And if you don't intentionally and consciously change your role models, that's going to be the one that operates. Boy, this is a lot of work I'm talking about. It's a lot of work because it doesn't stop. You can't decide once and never have to think about it again. It's something that revisits and reappears and resurfaces, and we get to look at it again. And no belief system is bad. How can this be true? Even a system that looks at, I don't have enough macaroni, is just something to wake us up. There is no bad belief system. It's just a matter of, do I choose to pay attention and up-level my consciousness to have a better quality of life for myself and for people in my world? And notice that little loaded word, better. Yeah, well, define better. We get to. We have that option. We have that luxury. And if we wish, we can decide to have the quality of life that we dream of. But we have to be willing to change our minds about our stories. The second group that Reverend Karen encourages us to contemplate are our mirrors. These are our peers, the people that we engage in life with. And if we're paying attention, we can see what we believe by looking at the people we hang out with and how they interact with money. Tricky part. This is not a judgment. This is not a criticism. A mirror doesn't have a point of view. It's just a mirror. So if you're hanging around with somebody who's whining, or not enouging, or pitifuling, like, what is this person showing me that I am at some level supporting? And just like every other experience in our lives, we get to decide how we wish to have, what kind of experience we wish to have. Before I moved here, I had a friend who talked about wanting to join a gym for like years. And finally, she got serious. Like, it was, I could see that it was really, really coming. And I said, well, I'll go with you. So I found a gym that we could both go to, and we had an agreement. This is, peer supporting peer. We had an agreement that we would meet at the gym 3 mornings a week at 7 o'clock. Worked great. She did the treadmill. I did the treadmill sometimes. I did other stuff too. But it was like, we have this decision to make that up levels our experience. And we did it for a while, and then she left town, and then the gym closed, and then I moved too. But it was that decision, peer to peer, that made a difference for both of us for a while. Now here's the thing, for a while. So our peer-to-peer group relationships, nothing is fixed in stone. We can't, no, better words, it's not reasonable to assume that any relationship is going to last to infinity in the same way. They last, but they change. So anytime we get fixed in our expectation that something's going to be exactly the same 5 years from now or 10 years from now, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. Because stuff happens. People change at different levels. Their paths change. So, at least for now, if you want to up-level your experience, peer-to-peer, in your experience of finances, you might want to join a prosperity mastermind group. We have one here, CSLT. It meets twice a month on Zoom. And the people who are participating in that have had what many people would call miracles happen. We just call them demonstrations because it's an experience of the truth. You have to be willing to engage. You have to be willing to consistently show up and support each other in their dream. The link's in the newsletter. Twice a month. Decide, commit, play. And if groups are not your thing, because they're not everybody's thing, but you still wish to up-level your experience, you can work with one of my favorite ideas, which is to create a new mental equivalent. And what's a mental equivalent? I've given entire talks about this topic because it's my favorite. Actually, you're already using a mental equivalent. Because it's a decision you've made. It's an idea you had, and it's an idea that you implemented. The notion of putting a name on it means I can choose differently than I presently am living. And if you believe that life is hard or a struggle and you don't have enough or you have to work too hard for everything you get, then that's your mental equivalent. The cool part is every single one of us has the option to create a new one. And the option at all times to pick something that uplifts us more. Continuously. The first thing that will happen, I'm going to warn you right off the bat, the first thing that will happen when you choose a new mental equivalent, a new dream, a new goal, is every bit of garbage thinking in your head that argues with that will show up first. Every bit. It's like, who do you think you are to think that you can have something better than you presently have? Who do you think you are? Well, actually, I know better. I know I can have these things. But that's what happens first, is that critical parent voice in your head that says, how dare you think you can have a life you love? And you get to decide what to do with that. We all do. It's not unique. So in yesterday morning's daily morning practice, I read a piece in this month's Science of Mind magazine. It was from Dr. Holmes, from a book called A New Design for Living, page 105 and 106. You'll love this. He wrote, basically, all we have to do is learn to get rid of all of our fears and doubts, to remove all confusion and bewilderment. Right. Until at last we arrive, either through intuition or through due process of logical thinking, at a place where we can start out with the simple proposition that I am one with God, the infinite creative intelligence, and I am no longer conditioned or controlled by any external situation whatsoever. There's the road. This is the point of departure from being influenced by conditions to influencing conditions. Instead of being in the back seat of a runaway driverless car with endless hazards ahead, we now find ourselves in the driver's seat, calm, cool, and deliberate. And with the knowledge of where we want to go and how we're going to get there, we proceed carefully to guide and direct our way along the highway of life. And then Reverend Jesse Jennings, who built the things this month, is it that simple to just get rid of our fears and doubts? Here's a plan. Take one, or one set at a time. First, we sort them out. If there's something we don't feel we can do, have we ever even wanted to do it? If not, set it aside. If it's something we are drawn to but don't feel capable, we get to identify what it is about that thing that's intimidating and deal with that. It's not this world out here that's the problem. It's the stories we make up about it. That's always true. And then the fun part about being in present time, is this fear really about what's happening now? Or is it a memory of personal experience? Or simply an observation of someone else's history? This is good information. Do you see how important it is to be honest and up to date with your own stories, with your own history, with your own recognition of the world? Truth-telling is critical. And anytime we allow any lazy thinking to be in charge of us, it's like being in the back seat of a runaway driverless car. So Reverend Karen wrote that we get models and mirrors in our lives by default. I don't agree with her. You won't be surprised by that. Mirrors, yeah, we pick them. Role models, we pick them. And we're in control of who we pick. We're in control of who we decide to spend our mental and spiritual energy with. And then the third group, mentors, we definitely have a choice about whether and who we engage with in this area. Think about how you choose a coach or an expert or a teacher. Do you leave that to chance? Or do you exercise a preference? How do you pick? Everybody's answer is going to be different. And then the last group I'm going to mention is partnered relationships. These could be business relationships. They could be cohabitation relationships, or any kind or level or degree of family relationships. And it matters a great deal whether you've actually discussed what's important to you in those relationships. I didn't know better. I stumbled into one, and it was good for a couple years, and it wasn't good for a lot of years, because I didn't know then that it was important to be clear about what was important to me. I assumed they could read my mind, and we thought the same thing. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. We have to be in charge of ourselves. Have to. Actually, we don't have to. We can be in that driverless runaway car if we want. Or we can choose to be in charge of ourselves. We can be responsible for speaking up for our own choices, our own dreams, our own decisions. This being human and being aware that we have choices and inevitable consequences is a continuous, never-ending activity. So I'm really grateful nobody can get it wrong. We just get to keep entertaining those possibilities. So I want to close by repeating what Dr. Holmes wrote in the final conclusion of the Science of Mind text, page 423. But the practice of truth is personal to each, and in the long run, no one can live our lives for us. To each is given what they need, and the gifts of heaven come alike to all. How we shall use these gifts is all that matters. To hold one's thoughts steadfastly to the constructive, that which endures, and to the truth, which may not be easy in a rapidly changing world. But to the one who makes the attempt, much is guaranteed. The essence of spiritual mind healing and of all true religious philosophy is an inner realization of the presence of perfection within everyone and all about. So we live in this unity, this oneness. We live in the experience of the law of cause and effect, and we live in this experience of circulation. We don't set any of those things in motion. Our job is to pay attention. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So if I said anything that was useful for you in this 20 minutes or so that I talked, hold that in your mind. Around here we pray affirmatively, which is claiming the good. So I'll speak the words. I know that one life, which is God, is perfect, and that life lives as me and lives as each beloved. No matter whether they're aware of it or not, no matter whether I'm aware of it or not. That divinity shows up as love and life and joy and harmony and peace. And anytime I'm not having an experience of those, it's because I've created a separation. And I get to rearrange my thinking. I get to rearrange my mind to see the capital T truth. That one life, that one love, that one goodness that lives within, as, through, and underpins the life of all. So I celebrate this awareness. I celebrate this practice, this continuous practice of interrogating myself, of understanding and interpreting my experience through this lens of love, through this lens of peace, of harmony, of order, of joy. And I know that same opportunity for each and for all, because each one lives as the divine to the level of their understanding. And each one is doing the right thing as they understand it. And each one has the possibility of changing their mind at any moment, including me. So I live in this space of love, and I remember that I live there. I live in this space of peace, and I remember that I live there. I live there in the space of joy and delight, and remember that I live there. And I remember that it is good and very good, and I let it be. And so it is.